Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone, the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I sent you a tweet last week that was incredibly difficult. We are going to expand on it a little bit, but basically, Nick, I sent you a tweet from a guy named Sam Block. His Twitter is at the Block Spot, and I've seen he's done a couple of these now, but this was the first one I saw. He listed out 12 sporting events. You got to keep 3 of them, and you had to cut 9 of them. The events listed off were NCAA March Madness, NBA playoffs, WNBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, which is the NHL, college football playoffs, NFL playoffs, MLB postseason, the College Baseball World Series, which for those that aren't American might not get this, but is incredible television, Wimbledon, the World Cup, the Olympics, and the Masters. Now, Nick, what I will say is that's a very US focused list. So I think we agreed we'd expand it a little bit. Based on all those, they're either postseason tournaments or kind of major events. So you couldn't just throw in the Premier League. But I figured you could do Champions League. You could say knockout onwards of the
Yep.
Champions League. I'm going to throw in the darts because I love the darts. Um,
I knew that was
and,
gonna get in there.
and there's no cricket, Nick. So I don't know if you want to include the Ashes as an Aussie or if there's another cricket event you prefer
Mm.
over that. But I will leave that to you. And I say instead of picking 3 of 12, we'll say keep 4 of 15 with that added list. But I'll let you clarify which cricket event you
Keeping
want
four.
placed in there.
So did you say keeping 4 of the 15? Oof,
Correct. Yeah.
tough, tough. I would say that's a very good question. I would say Ashes is probably the one to
Yeah.
have in there. Well, that's a no-brainer, like, for any cricketing fan to say
Yeah.
no to. I was gonna say the IPL because that's quite seasonal
Yeah.
as well, and that's more of a balancing act. I think I'd love to
Yeah.
go to it, but there's a lot of events I'd like to go to if I only get to
Yeah.
pick a handful. So I'll throw that in the mix. So how are we
Yeah.
doing this exactly? I've got to rattle off. What are we doing? We going
We
one by one or?
Sure, let's go one by one. I mean, for me, first and foremost, I'll keep it easy. I'm an NFL guy. I'm sticking with the NFL playoffs. I want the Super Bowl at the end. It's also an annual event, which not all of these necessarily in here are annual, except I guess the Olympics is the one. But I'm going to start with the NFL playoffs. Nick, are you keeping that, or you not prioritizing it?
I'm gonna not prioritize it. I think there's too many unique
Mhm.
events in that list that I would actually.
Fair.
It's just too much travel. Fly all the
Yeah.
way around the US for the whole length
Yeah.
of the playoffs. It was the
Mhm.
Super Bowl only. I put the Super Bowl, but the
Yeah.
playoffs. I mean, and I'm a pretty big NFL fan, but
Yeah, that's
there's a
fair.
lot. There's a lot in there that you've listed. I think I'll have to keep my cards, like, keep my options open for now.
All right, so pick one. Where do you want to start off with?
All right, let's do the NBA playoffs then, just while keeping on the American sports theme. Since you picked the NFL, what about the NBA?
I'll be honest. You and I are actually going to do a podcast on this. We've spoken about this, whether or not we have long term concerns about the NBA and its current product. I personally don't want to watch SGA flop around on the court. I'm not particularly happy with the on court product right now. So the NBA playoffs is, I think all playoff sports are better than what they are in the regular season. But I'll be honest, like, I just don't watch as much NBA as I used to with the time difference. But I don't like what I'm seeing on the court right now from the bits that I do
Hmm.
see.
Well, the thing with all this is, like, when I'm looking at these as events, they're not just one off. There's a lot going on. Again,
Yeah,
with the NBA, and I think I'd say the same now for the MLB. There's just so many games that happen. I know there's a lot of excitement that
yeah,
builds up to these, but there's a lot of my attention needed to
yeah.
enjoy these events, whereas I kind of like the concentration of some of the others, which I think is going to skew my vote a little bit as we go. So I'm
All
going to
right,
leave out the NBA as well.
all right. I guess for me, my second one, like we already, I'm picking the darts. I love the darts. It's just incredible. I think it's great television. I also have been in person. Best sporting event I've ever been to in person. I get that won't be for everybody, but like if I only get to pick 4, like the World Darts Championship is up there for me.
I've never been, and I think I know everyone. Everyone I know who's based in the UK or in London has pretty much gone at some stage, and it's like I don't know, a rite of passage to go into the darts, the Ali Pali event each year. But I've never been. So for everything I've heard and seen, it sounds like something that is too good to miss. But I am going to leave it off my list still.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So what is one you do want to keep then?
I'm definitely going to go with the Masters. I think there's too much
Fair.
behind the Masters there that all the stories you hear about that experience, it feels like it's like almost an out of body experience you'll have if you're a golf fan going to an event like that, and just the way they manage the experience and the prestige of it all. So I think that's going to be my must-have in the list.
Yeah, I'm a bit, maybe next year when I've this because this will be my second year of like golfing. Maybe I'll feel different. But Nick, I will say like I would let me throw a curveball. I wouldn't mind going to the Waste Management Open. That seems like basically if you took golf and darts and put it together.
Have you seen the there's a live golf event they run in Adelaide in Australia? It's
Mm,
almost as wild as the
mm,
Waste Management Open now. It's like, I don't want to call it the poor man's version, but it's definitely the Southern Hemisphere's version of
fair.
that. There's shots on if you look online where people like players like hit a drive and then they'll be throwing beers from the crowd onto the
Yeah.
tee box, and it's full of Australians, which the
Yeah.
variabilities of what Aussies can do is pretty out there. I mean, Americans give them a good run for their money as well. So that's not the Waste Management Open level. Was it the
Yeah.
17th hole? I think's got all the craziness that goes on.
Well, there's the
I've
other
seen
hole where the caddies race each other, which is great.
really.
Yeah, they race each other down the fairway carrying the bags. It's great.
Oh, I love that. I just love when they try something, do something a bit different. It breaks that tightness that comes sort of
Yeah.
is manifested around golf, which is nice to see. So I'm all for it. Yeah, the Masters is my go-to there. So that's the first one on my list.
Fair. And then between the two football, we got the World Cup and the Champions League knockout. This is interesting, Nick, because I know the World Cup is the big one. My challenge is it's only once every 4 years, whereas I get, Champions League every
Oh.
year. Quality
Oh,
of football, but we don't watch the World Cup for the quality of football, right, Nick? Like we understand we're not going to get the best of the best. Mm, uh,
I'm gonna go clearly the World Cup. I think it's just,
yeah,
again, I'm looking for the highs, and
yeah,
when I've been to those types of sporting events that are nationalized, they just sort of transcend the
yeah,
sport a little bit. It's about the culture, their positive energy around it. Now, granted, they can go quite negative if things go pear-shaped, but
yeah,
generally, there's such a good aura around those major events that I think I'd have to do the World Cup. Although I
yeah,
will not be going out there, hadn't even considered going out there for New York for the US version of it, but I think that would be up there as being part of the whole atmosphere. It's like almost
yeah,
the main part of that is almost what's happened between the matches as much as
yeah.
the match itself, I think.
Yeah, it is a big party. You're not gonna get that with Champions League. Maybe if you're just going to watch, but if you were for the whole event, you're probably all right. One place I will disagree with you on, Nick, and this is just me being a biased American. I think Major League Baseball playoffs are incredible, because every pitch, the strategy behind it is just so cranked up on steroids. Now granted, my Cincinnati Reds have not been good. I don't think they've won a playoff series since the year I was born in 1990. Very similar to my Cincinnati Bengals, but I think playoff baseball is just incredible. But again, that might be the purist in me. But yeah, I could watch it's one of the few times, like, I to this day will stay up and watch live baseball. I think it's incredible.
I think because the season's so freaking long, the
Yeah,
MLB season, for me, it's made the season basically almost redundant as an existence. But then the playoffs come, and I've heard this from a lot of people that they say the postseason is a whole different environment. It's the best of all of those experiences in terms of all the other major leagues and in terms of the importance of the playoffs relative to the main season. So I definitely can understand that. I think these events, they're just still so long for me that
yeah,
if it was like what's the world, it was the World Series,
yeah.
then
True,
I'd be like, yeah, sign me up. But the postseason is quite long.
it is. Well, Nick, I've come to my 4. I've got the darts, I've got the NFL playoffs, I've got the MLB postseason, and I've got the World Cup. So those are my 4. At the moment, you've got the Masters and the World Cup. You've still got 2 more to pick off.
God, I've tried to keep my options open. Now I've left myself in a bit of a hole. The easy ones to say is the Olympics. I think I'd
Fair.
enjoyed so much going to London 2012, and I wish I'd gone to even Milano Cortina and done a Winter Olympics. I think the Winter
Yeah,
Olympics would be a really cool experience as
yeah.
well. If it has to be from the list, I actually probably would bring the NFL final playoffs back into it. I think that's probably what I'd
Just
list off as my
bring it
fourth.
back
If
in.
I could
It's
bring,
okay.
yeah, well, if I had to go for any others, I mean, tennis is good.
Yeah,
I actually have loved tennis most of my life, but
yeah,
uh, I've been to Wimbledon.
yeah,
Wimbledon's got an aura about it that actually, yeah, I'm not. It doesn't like the energy. It has to
yeah,
be the right game. I think it's like
yeah,
any experience, but I haven't been let down by a couple of games. I think is probably
yeah,
why I've been unsure about it. So let's go the NFL because it's all sudden death matches.
yeah.
Last man standing, best team wins, all that jazz. I think I like that versus the other ones. They're just a little bit too long for me and too much of a commitment of my time in this day and age.
That's fair. Well, everybody, like I said, I might put the tweet in the description of the podcast. Go find it. Let us know which events you would choose as yours, or feel free to add in some European events because, like I said, it is a bit of a an American centric list. You did leave off the Ashes, Nick. It's not on your to do list. You had the ability to do so, but
Oh, should have had that in there instead. I would have had that instead of the NFL. But then started looking at my list. And I'm like, it's also very old white dude, basically.
yeah.
Or white Brit Aussie. Like, need to have something different in there. The NFL, that's so different. Yeah, tell us what you think. Ashes, I would definitely put in there if I did the list again. But here we go.
So, Nick, the nature of covering news is depending on when you record, sometimes news comes afterwards. And last week we recorded, and then the news broke that we were going to get, we'll call it Premflix for now, however you want to go about it, with the Premier League launching a D2C platform in Singapore. Now, there's a whole sort of set of criteria with that. I'm going to start on the other end of things, Nick, before we specifically look at the Singapore side of things. I saw an interesting post, and I apologies if I butchered his name, but Daniel Harrigy at our friends at Ampere Analysis did a post. And I think what's worth looking at is everyone's like, oh, is this a precursor to getting a D2C platform in the UK? Everyone's sort of, is this them lining it up? Well, they did a bit of a look into things, looking at League One going direct to consumer in France as a bit of a comparison. At the moment, they've got it as the Premier League generates 1.6 billion per season from its domestic right partners in Sky Sports and TNT Sports. So any direct to consumer platform, Nick, we would assume at minimum they have to make 1.6 billion back. Otherwise, what's the point? The second part of that is they reckon there's a unique subscriber base for Sky Sports and TNT Sports. It's between 4 to 5 million for their linear channels and OTT is sort of where they're going with that. For context, there it's going to cost you around 45, 50 pounds a month to do all those packages. And they had some other stats in there about how many people are subscribing to those packages, whether or not they're sports fans, different things like that. But basically, the final number that he got to in order for Sky Sports to be able to kind of, or sorry, not Sky Sports, the Premier League to make their money back, a monthly subscription would have to cost 40 quid a month, which I I personally think it'd probably be a little bit higher, Nick, because I feel like if they're going to go D2C, their goal wouldn't be to
Yeah.
just make the same amount of money by doing three times as much work because they would have to do the marketing, they'd have to build the platform, they'd have to have the customer service. Like, I don't think they're doing that move unless they're trying to significantly go above their broadcast numbers. So I thought it was interesting, Nick, and we've heard the Simon Jordan quote numerous times that hey, if you just charge everybody 10 quid a month, you'd make $3 billion, whatever it is. I just don't think it's happening, Nick. So I guess before we get into the Singapore side of things, just talking specifically, I guess a question off the Singapore thing. Do you think this actually means that we're going to see D2C in the UK with the Premier League?
I think if you were going to see it, you would see a similar model of where it'd be in partnership with Sky. I don't think you would see Premier League going completely alone just because they would be biting the hand that feeds them right now. And I still think they're too far away from that. Now, if Sky starts to say, look, we're actually going to need to massively decrease our investment into the rights that we're spending with you, that might force their hand, but I don't think that's going to happen at any time soon. I think that Sky needs the Premier League and the Premier League needs Sky, and those will find a way of working together in some fashion to create some sort of D2C proposition if the market opportunity presented itself or they sorted out the 3 p.m. blackout, et cetera, et cetera. I just can't see them cutting Sky's grass, basically. At least not this cycle. Maybe in the future. I think that this will be they're a few years away from really considering this seriously. But now that they have the flexibility with managing production, more of the production in house, although Sky does their live broadcast production for them, the bulk of it. Um, yeah, I think they're a few years away before they would seriously consider doing something in the UK. So sorry to Simon Jordan.
And apologies, I've put the proverbial horse in front of the cart. But, I just felt like, before we go into it, let's just clear things up. Like, I don't think this story necessarily means what some people may hope it means. So maybe, Nick, now we can talk a little bit specifically about what it is that kicked this all off or sort of reinvigorated this conversation. Cause I saw a bunch of tweets being like, oh, Premier League's going D2C. And I was like, you are not reading the fine print. So maybe just give a little bit, Nick, what's actually taking place in Singapore, what is significant about it, but then perhaps maybe we can elaborate a little bit more just about what's maybe misunderstood about it.
I'm sure. So Premier League is launching a product called Premier League Plus it is going to be in partnership with the current main in-market rights holder, StarHub. So it's not completely standalone. It is a partnership. It is an extension of the current partnership. So it wasn't existing rights in the existing agreement. Now, the Premier League, previous cycle, before this agreement with StarHub was in place for just being more of a traditional rights deal, they were threatening, or there was a rumor that they were looking to launch back then and to launch a DTC proposition in market before a last minute deal was hashed out. But the difference from then to now is basically Premier League has been building to this moment with lots of little moves they've made. They've lined up MediaKind as one of their major OTT partners and platforms to help all of that ecosystem work happen, which you need if you want to go if you take OTT seriously. They've launched it in partnership with StarHub. They've got the production of content in house now, so they can manage that appropriately to make sure they're delivering the right type of experience on platform. So that they've been intentional at taking their time because they've been exploding their media rights, international media rights, whilst everyone else has struggled. But now it's added on as an extension, not necessarily as a competitor to their current marketplace. Now, could they in the future say to StarHub, well, if you don't buy this sort of package of rights, including Premier League Plus, will we do it ourselves? Absolutely. But for now, it's a lovely bolt on for them to be able to offer. And it aligns with what we've talked a little bit about over the year or last year or two. This idea of these aggregation players basically buying deals which incorporate also the OTT offering. We talked about Apple and F1. That's part of the package they bought in the US. It's also what the NBA has done with their deal with Amazon, where and even to some extent the NFL deal with DAZN, although is a little bit different, but basically allows the partner to get people from, even if they are coming into just the live experience, to then try and funnel them into the more premium OTT product, which obviously drives up the revenue they are generating from each of those users now, gives them more upside basically on each and every customer they're bringing into their ecosystem. So, look, it's something. It's a great marketplace for them to launch because of the connectivity of Singapore. The size of the marketplace won't put a lot of pressure on the launch and getting things wrong. It just makes a lot of sense to test in a market like this, and I think it is just going to be the beginning for them, depending on what strategy they ultimately do take.
Yeah, that's what I agree with, Nick. I think people got really excited. They saw Premier League, they saw D2C, and they jumped on it. Now, I don't think that's necessarily been the industry conclusion, but I think that's what the conclusion has been for consumers, who might not necessarily be in the know or understand the market specifics or things like that. But I feel like most people in the industry kind of get what it is, but I'm not entirely sure if that stopped some of the waves of excitement.
I'm not sure. I think a lot of people in the industry also don't quite understand. I get excited and read the headlines, but I
Yeah.
think the Premier League have been the standouts with their media rights approach for some time, and what they've been able to do, building their international rights partnerships and building the revenue, blows everyone out the water when it comes to the scale of the revenues they generate. Ultimately, more and more than their local market, which is the only sport that does that. There was the deal we talked about recently, which was there was it in
It was
LATAM,
in
where it was in
LATAM,
again
yeah,
another, yeah,
another
600 million plus
500,000,000.
US. Yeah, I mean, just those numbers are unbelievable when you think about the scale of the market, the relative value of the media rights market in those places, and they're able to just keep growing the pie for themselves. So I think they'll be smart about their approach here. They will probably be a little bit more bullish perhaps on some of their negotiations with some people, but they're not going to bite the hands that are feeding them. And they've got a lot of big investors into their rights, and the Premier League's in pole position in almost every way. The NFL gets a lot of coverage because of its 110 billion dollar rights deal, and it should. But I think the best approach, and I think if you link it with how they've marketed and grown the brand of the clubs and the league itself, the Premier League is a standout for sure.
Just wait till we have that conversation about why the Premier League would be better off as a closed league and not promotion and relegation. But I will save that for another time, Nick, to get people fired up. Um, but another story, Nick, that broke but didn't break all the way. We covered it a little bit, but then we had some follow up news where we talked about Apple's first season with Formula One, and we talked about some of the concerns that we had based on some of the things that we saw or what we viewed as shortcomings with the partnership with MLS, and we sort of questioned, would Formula One take a different approach, or would Apple take a different approach to essentially assure they wouldn't end up in a similar situation that they ended up in with that deal. And one of the things we talked about is, are there going to be potential sub licensing? And you mentioned yourself, Nick, one of the concerns was maybe not concerns, but the realities of it when you were judging success is the US races need to succeed in the US, which is where the Apple deal is. And let's be very clear about that. It is a US deal, it's not a global deal. Doesn't matter what happens in the other races so long as the US races perform. And that's where we talk about some of the sub licensing and things like that. And of course, not too long after we recorded the episode, it did come out that there are going to be some things specifically with Netflix in terms of how they're going to try to increase their scale, their reach. So I guess, Nick, now that we do have that context, does it change anything you said before? Does it validate things you said before? Does it make you feel better about the general approach that Formula One is taking based off some of the question marks we had?
It makes me certain that they are listening to this podcast and it reacted
Yes, yes.
immediately after we shared our thoughts on it. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's more about what Apple is doing. I think maybe that's why, yeah, we heard Stefano Domenicali, the CEO of F1, talking about how this Apple partnership is going to give them more reach and visibility, and maybe this is the cat out the rabbit out of the hat, I think is the saying I'm
Okay.
trying to think of. Basically, like knew that these sub licensing arrangements are going to come, which are going to significantly increase their visibility and audience outside the Apple ecosystem. And if they do that and they continue to do a few more of these types of relationships, then all of a sudden, F1 will be much more visible in more places than it has in the past. Um, I like the announcements, which was with Netflix, the Netflix getting the Canadian Grand Prix live, which will be their first time broadcasting live F1, but in return, them getting Drive to Survive. I'd love to know the economics there, whether that was just a straight little swap deal or
Yeah.
whether there was something going either way there. But either way, it's a win-win, I think, for both sides. Netflix get to test how the interest and uptake of an F1 race will be on the platform, and Apple also get to see what Drive to Survive, how that performs on platform, which you think about that, the timing of this is very interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that Netflix aren't afraid to sub-license rights, so that could mean that they could be in for more F1 races if it goes to plan, if it goes well. But also, Drive to Survive is obviously Netflix powered and funded series, but at some stage, Box to Box might look for a new home.
Yeah.
Apple could be a logical next place to go for it if the F1 and Apple synergies really play out well. So they're kind of like both getting an opportunity to test the waters and potentially eat each other's lunch at some stage. But I think it's a nice test case for both of them. They're not afraid to dip the toes in. But interestingly, it is the Canadian Grand Prix only, which I'm not entirely surprised by. I think that they will still end up selling the US rights to an ESPN or an NBC because those are the races that really rate well and could be a real advertising driver for those collective partners. And I think Apple may decide for year one they want to keep it on their own platforms just to see what they can bring to their own, given it is free. But I think in future years you would see them putting it behind a paywall. But interesting, it's Canadian Grand Prix and it's the Miami Grand Prix that they've done a deal with Yahoo on, where they'll be streaming practice and qualifying sessions on the platform. So they've got a few months underneath to get underneath their belts before you start seeing these additional layers to it, which I think is also quite a smart move for them.
How much would you credit this to them pivoting from what they experienced with MLS? Now, granted, they're different deals, right? Because the MLS deal was a global deal, whereas we've mentioned this is a strictly domestic deal within the US. How much of this is direct learnings versus they're actually completely different deals in terms of their structure that it was never going to be that similar?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, in short, I think they've learned a lot, and I don't expect someone like Apple to make the same mistakes twice, particularly of that nature. Obviously, they had already decided with MLS to put that in front of the paywall because they knew that that wasn't working for
Yeah.
them either. And the relative value, I'm guessing the relative value of even building a mini subscription business isn't enough for Apple to move the needle. So
Yeah.
why not just get more people engaged with the brand by getting as many people onto their platforms as possible? So I'm not surprised that they've shifted from that point of view. I do wonder whether it was actually an active condition that was agreed by Apple and F1 at the time because of the fear of, which is the fear I've shared about that lack of visibility, meaning that F1's fan growth might start to die off or fade. But these deals aren't enough to say that's resolved now. These are two steps they've made. I think they need to make another 6 to 7 steps
Yeah.
of these types of deals to create more visibility. Otherwise, it will be a bit half-assed or half-hearted,
Yeah.
basically, with Netflix, one Grand Prix on Netflix, okay, great. Yahoo having practice and qualifying, okay, it'll help. It's a good marketing tool for that event, but it's not gonna massively move the needle. Now, if there was every single race and Yahoo do great fantasy sports, they also had F1 fantasy on the platform, and they were trying to create a new ecosystem of fans there, then I'd be like, "Yeah, we're talking." But at the moment, it's still only a bit too top level to, like, get too excited about it, I think.
Well, who knows, Nick? They might hear this podcast and we'll get more news.
Well, we're gonna be in New York by the time this goes out,
Sure.
and we might be hearing about it firsthand on site in New York.
Very good. That'd be lovely.
What's happening now and next in sports tech? As AI adoption accelerates rapidly, the inaugural Global Sports Tech Report from Sports Pro and Sportradar reveals which technologies and trends are driving real business impact across 6 core areas of sport. Informed by a global survey of senior executives and insights from leading tech and sport organizations, the report offers a 360-degree view of what's working today and where the industry is headed tomorrow. Access the full report via the Sports Pro website.
Well, Nick, the last thing, speaking about travels, you were recently in Germany last week for the Bundesliga, the DFL's Sports Innovation event, which takes place every other year. Um, I would like to go in the future at some point because I've seen footage of it, Nick, and it looks like not sorry, it looks unlike any other industry event I can really think of, in terms of the fact that they've got live football matches going on in the background, some of the live tech demonstrations. Just looks like a really cool way to spend a couple days watching football, and experiencing some things, firsthand. So I guess, Nick, maybe just you could potentially talk about sort of the role Sports Pro plays with sports innovation, and that's sort of why you and I believe John and George were out there, and then just maybe some of your key takeaways that you saw from some of the sports technology, that the DFL was rolling out at that event, or some of the partners that were there.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a great event to attend. They have it as basically an invite-only event, although they invite a lot of people. So I think it was around 1,500 people, I think, was in attendance at the event. But it is quite German, but also has it broadened out to be much more global and European now than it ever has been. And there are loads of technology on display. They really make a commitment to having an immersive experience, a truly immersive experience. And as someone who's tried to do that before with their events, it's really tough to do.
Yeah.
But they've made a massive commitment to it because they want to showcase and they want to, well, showcase basically what they're investing their time and resources on as the Bundesliga, but also what they do with some of their partners. So it is a bit of a commercial showcase for them, but also it's a great, they can put themselves at the heart of sports innovation and technology. They also invest innovation hubs and alike. So the Bundesliga has been, and we've talked about them loads of times. They've really been at the forefront of innovation across sports, media, broadcasting. And one of the reasons they've done so well internationally with their rights is because of their investment into technology and their ability to deliver almost a very end-to-end solution for broadcast partners across the world. And the reason they've been able to do it is a lot of that technology is on display at these events. They show how they bring all that to life and also show what potentially is coming next. I really enjoyed my experience there. Got pleasure to be on stage a couple of times talking to Charlie Klassen from Sky Deutschland, and I also led on a technology a panel. I think the panel's name was what technology is driving increase in fandom and new business models was the name of it. And so we now, no surprise to say that my panelists were all very supportive of AI and technology driving loads new revenue to us. Roman Butch, who's from UEFA, was on there. He was a little bit more pragmatic, but the others were very, very bullish on how it was going to transform all the monetization models and transform the industry. So it was an interesting chat. I enjoyed both experiences, enjoyed speaking to Charlie both on and off stage as well, hearing a bit more about his views on things. We might share some of that content on the
Yeah.
pod in coming episodes. But like what I got the feel from Charlie was basically, Sky are such big partners and investors of things like the Bundesliga, but they need even more than ever to basically maximize the value of that investment and commitment. They've got something like 500 and was it 60
It's a
games out of
big number.
620. It's a huge number. That's across both the top two tiers of the Bundesliga. So they again, their success is tied together very, very closely, the league and the broadcaster, but just they need to get closer to the action, get closer to the athletes to get more access, because that is what seems to be resonating with audiences and fans now is that content that comes straight from the athlete's mouth, or it gives you something you're not used to seeing
Mhm.
is what's really opening and moving the needle. So that was interesting just to hear his views on that. Yeah, great experience, and I would recommend if anyone gets a chance, it's every 2 years that event, at least that's what it has been. I would I would warmly recommend going and attending that event. It is definitely a must see. I can add more about the experiences, but do you wanna ask anything further
Well,
on that?
I was gonna ask if you had a favorite exhibition piece of
Oh,
technology that you saw. Now, it does
yes,
not have to be media related, so I
sure.
actually helped some of the voting with their innovation competition, and I'll admit I
Oh,
was
yeah.
a bit, biased because some of the stuff was a bit more performance tech where I'm like, not really my sweet spot, and I've always thought even with performance tech, to really make it good, it has to have a media application, so someone like, can you track player movement, but then can you turn it into consumable like fan data? So I was a little
Yeah.
biased on that, but I know they had all kinds of tech. I think I saw some of the robots playing football and different things like that. But was there a piece of technology? Ooh, that's really cool. Where you're like, you went out your way to go see it. And like I said, it doesn't have to be media related, but it might be. I don't know.
Yeah. I was gonna mention the robots was quite cool, watching them having a
Yeah.
football match together on this little field. They also had this synthetic ice setup, which is pretty cool because, the thought of setting up, like, temporary ice for rinks, basically, like
Yeah.
NHL quality rinks feels like obviously something you wouldn't see very often because it must be very cost obtrusive, but they basically were showing off how easy it is to create this synthetic ice experience that they were showing off and testing. It is, I'm guessing, not real ice, which was quite cool. Saw some camera tech, which was some of the broad when I was on stage doing the
Yeah.
content. I don't know what that means. They were filming the match live. So they have exhibition matches in the background. So we're standing there in the arena doing this interview, and there's a bit of a stage backdrop behind us. But behind that, you're sitting in the bleachers looking down. There's a game going on behind, and I don't know if it's under 18s or under
Yeah.
19s or something, and constantly you could hear there's loads of different AI cameras being used, and there's like drones flying through the air. And I don't know if you watched the Olympics and heard the drones sometimes on the
Yeah.
skiing, you really hear them. And at times I felt like it was like going to hit me in the head. It was like vroom, flying
Yeah.
past my head at like a million miles an hour because they're following the game and the ball and on the action. It was a bit of a weird experience, but really cool because then when I went inside, I could see what the cameras were showing. Now, I don't think you're going to see drones filming football matches
Yeah.
anytime soon because of the safety aspects of it. But I
Yeah.
don't think it's actually that far away if you think what they've done the Olympics and whatnot. I think it's probably closer to time than you would think.
Well, I was going to ask that question because you did mention the drone footage and how prevalent that was at the Olympics, and I think at the NFL they call it the spider cam, which I don't think they use enough of, where you get just some
Yeah,
incredible angles. Like I would love it. I love it when they show you the
they had
clip
that
from like
there.
where the quarterback can see. I'm like, I don't. I would love to have an option where that's the only angle I see. So I would love to just to see that be more prevalent again, where we talk about how do you take the same product and then redistribute it in 30 different ways. If you could give me an angle where I could just watch the NFL exclusively from behind the quarterback, where I could see like what he sees, like again,
Oh,
it's the same
yeah.
game, same set of rights, but like I'm very interested in like how many different ways can you give me the user get to choose my own camera angle, sort of establish my own broadcast.
Yeah, that would be so cool. I think we've seen some technologies popping up recently that using that volumetric technology, which effectively can give you that, but not in real time. It's
Yeah.
basically like using data and different cameras to be able to create those images and
Yeah.
those like digital visions of that. I guess I remember playing, Madden back in the day and other games where you can change the views of your
Yeah.
camera angles for highlights, and it's you kind of the same principle. And actually, was interesting for to that point was EA was presenting that it's. I missed half of it because I was about to go on stage, so I only caught a bit of the action of it. But it sounds like they've created basically broadcast technology that does what you've just described, and they're actually pitching it to broadcasters to actually sell as a product called TrackAb, I think it was called. And so using this volumetric technology, they'll be able to create like video game like angles, full broadcasts and different experiences. And they're trying to sell that to broadcasters, is what I understood it to be. So it was really cool because I do think sometimes I want to see more innovation in the broadcast product of sports. I think there's reasons why it hasn't as well,
Yeah.
because they have, when they do try things, they normally get their hand bitten off by
Yeah.
fans. So it's a tricky balance, but I think there's got to be some of that coming into play. And I do think it would change. Even watching some of the Winter Olympics and with watching the drone footage, and you start to see and get a better feel of like how crazy, like steep some of the hills they go
Yeah.
down and how fast they are. When you get those different angles, it changes your perspective on everything, and you instantly start appreciating it more. And the Winter Olympics are attributing a lot of their big numbers basically to that innovation. How much you can decide that
Yeah.
is determine if it is accurate or not, I don't know. But
Fair.
yeah, look, I'd say summary is great event. Would recommend anyone to go to it. Thrilled that Sports Pro could be. I think the term is we're a strategic partner for that event. We've
Yeah.
help them come up with the shape of the event, some of the marketing and strategy that goes alongside of it, and help them put a few different things together along the way. So we've helped them out to put that event on. But it was a great piece of work by D Sports and D Live, which is basically the city of Dusseldorf's event business, by Bundesliga, who's heavily obviously a part of that as well. And Transform Sports also was one of the strategic partners who are based in Germany, who led on the content side of things. So a nice joint approach. And yeah, thrilled we could be part of it, and looking forward to hopefully being part of it for the next one.
Well, to wrap things up, Nick, going off piece here, didn't give you prep for this, but you'll be ready for it. We mentioned we'll be in New York as this happens. Is there anything in particular um, you're looking forward to? I mean, I've got my interview session with the EVP of product at ESPN. I'm looking forward to, and I think the reason I'm looking forward to is whenever we talk about ESPN, understandably because of the amount of zeros and commas, we always talk about the rights deals. Whereas she's coming from a background having previously worked at YouTube, and we're going to talk about the product. And obviously, with them launching the new DTC platform, there's some stuff I'm really interested in, like the SC for You, which is Sports Center for You, where Nick, you've heard me say a million times, if you can get me a custom
It's
made highlight
coming.
package. So there's some things I want to dig into that. So I'm interested to speak with Aaron. Because we are going to cover ESPN, hopefully in a way we don't usually talk about. We usually are talking about the rights deals. I think to
Yeah.
be talking about the product, we might bring that interview to the podcast afterwards, but I'm looking very much to that session, although I'm very much biased.
Well, and for those listening, let us know if you like hearing those live event sessions on the channel, because we can drop them here. We can also put them in other places, or
Yeah.
we can just not do them and keep it all nice and quiet. But let us know what you think. I'm looking forward to. So I'm on stage and picking a couple of people off stage as well. I've got a session with the Global Sport Group, which is the CVC the sports division of CVC, which is investors into a dozen of the major sports properties. You've got La Liga, League and WTA, Volleyball World. I think like 14 billion
Yeah.
is invested at the moment, or is the value of their investments, which is quite an extraordinary number. They haven't done a lot of speaking publicly around their sports stuff. So I'm pretty intrigued to speak to Mark Alera, who is the chair of Global Sport Group. And he comes with an incredible background. He was the CTO and chair at BT Group in the UK, as well as EE, has worked at Sega in his previous life. So he's got a gaming
Yeah.
background, a telco background, and now a sports media background. And he was part of the journey of launching BT Sport and TNT, that was TNT
Yeah.
Sports before. So I've got a million and one questions for him that I'm hoping he'll answer for me. But and then obviously we announced and talked a little bit about the Equine Network purchase they've made. I think they're also on a bit of a fundraise, is what I'm guessing. So lots to dig into there. And I think there's going to be interesting crossovers of that around everything to do with the sports ecosystem. But a big part of their thesis appears to be around owning that relationship with fans from video and media channels through
Yeah.
to live events experiences. If you look at a couple of examples, I'm interested to hear a little bit more about their approach to all that. So I look, loads of good stuff. Talking to Pete Dystad to see Fox One off stage as well, which I'll put together an interview for and to get his views on things. I'm not sure what I'll be able to speak to him about, but I'm hoping I can at
Yeah.
least get a little bit of a sense of what that venue sports experience was like, which he was leading on at some stage, and also just where he sees the industry going. So yeah, looking forward to lots of that. There's just so much good stuff going on. I'm going to be trying to find time to
Yeah.
watch and listen, and amongst all the other responsibilities we have along the way.
There will be lots of coverage from us on that event. How we end up dropping it all, we'll need to figure it out because it'll be too much for any single episode. But if you're listening to this and you see us in New York, please do say hi. I think the last time I was out in New York, had a few people come up. So definitely do look out for us while you're on the ground if you're going to be joining us.
Absolutely. Yeah, come and say hello. And Chris, we'll be able to have a beer together as well, which is exciting.
Absolutely.
And we're also going to be doing something at TikTok's HQ.
Yep.
Lots going on. So a busy few days ahead for us. Got to pack my bags tonight and get all ready for that. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, everybody. We'll catch you on the next episode.